And we're back. I'm your host, BKP. Good morning from the office. We've had all morning long Georgia politics. We focused on Georgia politics. Tomorrow's the 24th. And yes, although July is vacation month, for Republicans out there, it's voter day, election day, for the voters to get out. I know we don't want a low turnout. Go and exercise your vote. Don't complain on what candidate you have for the November election if you don't go vote. But anyhow, tomorrow, the statewide races for Republican to be decided, Secretary of State, Lieutenant Governor, and Governor. And joining me now is a candidate for Lieutenant Governor of the state of Georgia, Republican David Shafer. Mr. Shafer, how are you today?
I'm doing great, and thanks so much for having me on the show.
Well, I told you, I told you while we were coming on the air, it's like doing a whole series of rock concerts and not remembering where you're at. If you don't remember where you're at or exactly what time it is, we're going to give you a pass, because I do not know how some of you guys do it. I watch your social media page, and bright and early you're having a sunrise breakfast with somebody every day, and then brunch, and then lunch, and an afternoon snack. So you've traveled across the state. Tell us a little bit about some of the things of interest that you're finding out throughout the state when you talk to the voters. What are some of the biggest concerns you hear that they have for the office of Lieutenant Governor?
Well, Georgia is a big state. We're the largest state by geography on this side of the Mississippi River. We've got over 10 million people now. We're probably the 8th largest state by population, and it's a state of diverse needs. I mean, the needs in North Georgia are different than the needs in Metro Atlanta and South Georgia, and you know, one of the most gratifying things has been what I've been able to learn about the strengths of the state and the challenges that it faces, and how we can best move Georgia forward.
Well, let me say this, because I have, and one of the reasons I wanted to try to get you on today is you're currently a state senator, and you know, if we rely on, it's disappointing. I'm going to try to find the words and just say disappointing what political action committees that are supposedly not directed by candidates. It's disappointing some of the commercials that's been put on TV and the accusations in these 60-second clips that, to me, are unfounded, because if you're going to make a strong accusation, somehow, some way, you should have to put out a paper on it to substantiate. You should have to mail everybody something to substantiate what you do in 60 seconds on TV. But the point is I want voters to be able to cut through that garbage that they're tired of and they're zoning out. As silly as it sounds, will you please tell the voters what is the office of Lieutenant Governor of Georgia and what are the major responsibilities?
Well, I've been disappointed too, and I know there have been millions of dollars spent in negative ads. If anybody's got any questions about anything that they've heard about me, go to www.deceptiveduncan.com. We catalog all of the allegations, and we provide the truth and documentation. I've been endorsed by a number of groups: the American Conservative Union, the National Rifle Association, GeorgiaCarry.org, the Family Policy Alliance, Georgia Right to Life. And you know what those endorsements mean. I mean, if you're pro-life and you're for Second Amendment rights, you know that, you know, I'm the candidate that you're supposed to vote for. My opponent's been endorsed by one organization that spent $3 million attacking me. It doesn't have a website. It doesn't have a statement of principles. It just has a P.O. box and $3 million of money that we don't know where it came from.
You know, interesting, not to interrupt you, but I did go to the Political Action Committee government transparency campaign finance website, went to the Political Action Committee, looked it up, but I can't find anything.
Right. The money is completely secret. And so
right.
you don't know who my opponent is beholden to. I mean, you know who's behind me. You know, I'm supported by the National Rifle Association and Georgia Right to Life and American Conservative Union, and you know what those endorsements mean. You have no idea what deal has been cut to attract the millions into this race that have attacked me. Back to your question, what's the role of the lieutenant governor? Well, other than being available if some sort of tragedy should befall the governor, which is something that has never happened and it's not going to happen, the principal duty of the lieutenant governor is to be the president of the Senate. I've served in that body for 16 years. I was most recently the president pro tem, elected 3 times unanimously by my colleagues to that role. I'd like to move into the president's role because I do think there are some changes that ought to be made in the way that we operate. Some processes that I think have become broken that I think need to be fixed. I'd like to see us pace our work better. We meet 40 days a year and we do 80% of our work in a 3-day period of time. And the work ought to be paced more evenly throughout the session. Every issue ought to be considered separately on its merits. We need to stop this practice of trading unrelated bills one for another. It almost always results in multiple poorly thought through ideas passing in the final moments of the session when people are tired and not paying attention. And I think to make those kind of changes, you've got to move people into the leadership roles that are committed to making them. And that's one of the reasons that I'm running.
Well, I will say, I'm as a voter and a citizen of the state of Georgia, I'm discouraged and disappointed with that final day, and get lawmakers to say, well, that paragraph was inserted at midnight last night, and now a bill that we did want to pass, we're still going to go ahead and pass it because we don't have time to do anything else with it. So, are those some of the things that you're saying you've kind of like a little discouraged, my words, and you'd like to see the process change?
Absolutely. Very little good happens after midnight.
Okay, well, you got it.
Why we are even meeting at midnight doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, we meet for 40 days a year, and we basically don't do anything for the first 10 or 15 days, and we do very little for the next 10 or 15 days, and then all of our work is jammed at the end. Now, I do understand that human beings tend to procrastinate. People work toward deadlines. You study more for the test the night before than any other day in the semester, but we can do a better job of operating. One of the things I'm proud of, Brian, when I was President Pro Tem, is that I led the effort to wire every Senate committee meeting room for audio and video. And we began earlier this year broadcasting live every Senate committee meeting and archiving those broadcasts forever so that you could see the behind the scenes work of the state Senate without having to drive to Atlanta or take off work. You can do it from the comfort of your own home. I think that kind of transparency benefits everyone, and you can't have that kind of transparency when we're meeting at 11 o'clock at night and conference committee reports are being sort of thrown together, and oftentimes the legislators haven't even had the opportunity to read them.
Well, I have to make an admission here, which many people already know how boring I am. I didn't know who exactly to thank or what group of lawmakers to thank for that, but I appreciate it because I am one that watches those Senate committee hearings and watches the votes. So I appreciate that, and I do watch that. And I'm trying to stay away from complaining and not say people complain, but they say, well, they do this and they do that, and we never know what's going on. Oh, no, you could go right now to the Georgia State Senate, and you can pull up the archives, and you can watch all the committee hearings and so on and so forth. And that is true, correct? I mean, I've watched many of them.
Absolutely. It started this year. I led the effort. It took $500,000 to wire the rooms. The House had done it earlier than us, in fairness, but their committees meet across the street from the Capitol in a relatively modern office building with drop ceilings, that was easier to wire than the old Capitol building, which is now almost 40 years old and wasn't really even designed for air conditioning or electricity, let alone audiovisual. But we made the investment and did it in a way that's tasteful and preserves the historic character of the building, but does give access to every Georgian to the work of their legislators.
Well, listen, I know you got to go from one interview after another to talk to the voters in Georgia, and I hope you get a full day of getting to explain why you would like to have the job. Tell me a little bit about the committees. I mean, let's stay with the Lieutenant Governor's responsibilities. The committees, the appointments of the committees. What are some of the rules in these committees that you would like to change? You talk about the process. What are some things that you would like to change? Maybe put some different requirements in on bills, when they could be introduced. I don't know what all you can do, but what are some of the things you would change? And tell us a little bit about the committee assignments and how that works.
Well, the committee assignments are made by a committee on assignments that's chaired by the Lieutenant Governor and includes several of the Senate leaders. I think that we ought to distribute, and every bill that's introduced is assigned to one committee or another to be studied. And frankly, there are some committees that get lots of bills and other committees that get very few bills. I think we need to do a better job of distributing the workload, so that each committee is in a better position to delve into and understand and perfect the bills that are assigned to it. And they need to begin meeting earlier and getting down to work earlier in the session, so that we can pace ourselves. I mean, we'll vote on 1, 2, 3 bills up until the 30th day of the session, when all of a sudden we're meeting it late at night. And again, some of that is human nature, but some of that can be fixed, I think, by exercising leadership. Now, I'm proud of the record, Brian, that I compiled when I was a state senator. I mean, I led the fight this year to cut our state income tax. I sponsored the constitutional amendment that put a cap on the income tax. I wrote Georgia's zero-based budgeting law that requires the budget to be rebuilt from scratch and every penny of spending justified. I mean, I've led on these sort of process issues that I believe will result in better laws, being enacted. And I've been a solid conservative on there hasn't been a single Second Amendment piece of legislation that's passed in the last 16 years that hadn't had my name attached to it, which is why I've been endorsed by NRA and GeorgiaCarry.org and the Georgia Federation of Hunting and Fishing. Not a single piece of life legislation that's passed that had my name attached to it, which is why I'm endorsed by Georgia Right to Life and rated 100% pro-life by the Georgia Life Alliance. And I want to sort of continue that conservatism as the Lieutenant Governor.
All right. Well, a couple things. Let me just ask you this. Well, you just said you wanted to continue that, but I like to ask the question in a direct way and have candidates actually, you have been in the Senate for some time. You do have what I would consider for a conservative record in the Senate. Why do you want the job? And us out here, and I'm going to say us out here, the voters out here in rural Georgia, the people, we want you to have the job to be a servant to the citizens of Georgia. Why do you want this job to be Lieutenant Governor? Why do you want to be Lieutenant Governor of Georgia?
Well, it's time for someone else, frankly, to represent the people of Johns Creek and Duluth in the state Senate. I do think we need to rotate regularly our representation, and I've been incredibly honored and privileged to represent those communities in the Senate. And it's time for someone else to do that. I'd like to be the Lieutenant Governor because I've got a record, the kind of record I think that people would want to have in the next Lieutenant Governor. I tell every audience and individual voter that as they try to discern between these Republican candidates, to study carefully the records they've compiled while they're in public office, because how someone behaves in public office is a better indicator of how they'll behave in the future than anything they say in their campaign speeches or write in their literature. And I've got a record of leading on conservative issues, of safeguarding our taxpayer dollars, protecting our individual liberties, and trying to improve the processes by which the state Senate operates. And I think that I think I can provide some additional leadership as the President Pro Tem. I'll close out with this. Brian, I've been endorsed by Governor Deal and by more than 300 current and former members of the Georgia General Assembly. These are men and women who have served with both my opponent and me. They know us both. They know our character. They know our work ethic. They know our leadership style. They know our accomplishments. And they're almost unanimously supporting me and urging you to do the same. And I hope every one of your listeners will give me their full consideration tomorrow when they cast their ballots in the Republican primary runoff.
All right, we'll end with this. Now, you do repeatedly express all of your endorsements, and yes, Georgia Carry and NRA and all of your pro-life endorsements, and I have a lot of respect for that, being a conservative myself. And to me, those kind of group endorsements are stronger, not just to say than individuals, just a lot of individuals coming out and saying they support you, but these groups, they endorse, might I say, that they feel they have a candidate that will continue to uphold or continue with the values that they try to present. And let's go with one, pro-life. There's I think off the top of my head 11 states that will hit the Supreme Court. We do know with Kavanaugh being appointed, if he is the conservative that we think he may be, this may be a time where Roe v. Wade is up, not to be overturned, but maybe a part at a time. And where I'm going with this, the state of Georgia the Senate did not get this complete this last session, but what's known as the heartbeat bill. Is that a bill as Lieutenant Governor that you could support?
Well, I was born in a home for unwed mothers run by the Sisters of Charity and adopted as an infant. I want every child to be born with the same blessings that I had, the love of parents and the protection of society's laws, and that the protection of innocent life is core to my is core to me personally and core to my public service. And I hope to see a day when every child has that same opportunity that I had, and would certainly be supportive of that legislation. We passed a fetal pain bill. I guess it was 4 years ago, that basically prohibited abortion on any baby that could experience pain in the womb. And the heartbeat bill obviously would prevent it before, prevent it after the heart begins beating of the baby. I'd support both those things. But more broadly, you touched on something. These endorsements, everyone ought to make up with their own mind about who they're going to be for. The endorsements are important, not because it's somebody else's opinion, but because when you talk about the National Rifle Association or Georgia Right to Life or the American Conservative Union or the Family Policy Alliance, those endorsements are a reflection of the records of the candidates.
Absolutely. They went all through your record. You didn't get that. I apologize for being rude, but they went all through your record before you got that.
Exactly. And I have fought for 16 years to strengthen families and protect innocent life and our God-given liberties, to limit government, to lower taxes, and that's why I've been endorsed by virtually every conservative leader and organization in the country, and I'm very, very proud of that.
I know you got to go, so I'll make two more questions very quick. You talk about your personal life there, and I've watched your commercial and adoption. This past year in the Senate, it did not get through. Faith-based organizations, much like Catholic Charities, a protection for them to follow through with their belief. I think it got so convoluted, nobody was trying to discriminate and say we could not have in the state of Georgia any adoption agencies for same-sex couples. And I won't go down a road, but Catholic Charities, for an example, faith-based organizations, that bill did not make it through. Is that a bill that you would continue to try to further if
no,
Lieutenant Governor?
I supported it. Absolutely. Look, I'm a strong supporter of adoption. I'm a strong supporter of faith-based adoption. In 4 different states, Catholic Charities has been shut down by the government, refused to do adoptions because they follow the practices of the Catholic Church in selecting the parents. We've got so many kids trapped in the foster care system. I'm for an all hands on deck approach, and any agency that has qualified parents, I don't care if they're only Catholic or only Baptist, as long as they're qualified parents, they ought to be able to adopt. And I'm all for these faith-based adoption agencies being able to recruit parents from within their religious faiths, and I don't believe they should be discriminated on for following the tenets of those faiths.
Well, I tell you what, Mr. Shafer, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on. All I wanted to do today, you got a long day because tomorrow is election day here in Georgia. For the runoff, you got to go from one interview to another. I appreciate you taking the time. I just wanted to get one more opportunity to share with our voters an opportunity to meet you and to hear a little bit outside of the noise in the 60-second sound bites. So I appreciate you very much for coming on, sir.
Appreciate the great public service you perform, Brian. Thanks so much for letting me be on this morning.
Okay, just hang on the line just a minute, and we're going to take a brief break, and we'll be right back.